Good evening. I call the regular meeting for the Ames City Council for Tuesday, September 10th to order. Good evening, Council, and those in the audience. And we got a couple of proclamations we'll start out with. First is Ames Art Month. Ames Art Month. Whereas the arts, including visual arts, dance, theater, public arts, music, and more, are an essential element of a vibrant and engaged community in Ames, and whereas the arts significantly impact the economic vitality of the state of Iowa by contributing $4.5 billion and 43,000 jobs to the state's economy, and whereas rich experiences with the arts help children develop crucial skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, social skills, fine motor skills, self-expression, imagination, creativity, and communication skills that are integral to success in and out of the classroom. And whereas the arts can promote healing and enhance well-being by bolstering coping, self-esteem, self-expression, and quality of life, and by reducing stress, depression, and situational anxiety. And whereas the arts can help residents feel more satisfied and rooted in their neighborhoods, it can foster unity by inspiring community pride, help people engage in difficult conversations, and facilitate understanding different points of view. Therefore, I, John A. Halen, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim the month of September as Ames Art Month. I encourage all citizens to support the arts in Ames. And it's my privilege to introduce Heather Johnson, who is from the Optic and Arts Center, and she's going to offer a few comments.
Thank you so much. I just want to acknowledge also the funding from the City of Ames Commission on the Arts. It's greatly appreciated, especially when state funding and national funding for the arts is being cut. We know that the arts are a catalyst that help shape a community. They help to bind people into place, into each other. Cultural experiences and the arts improve the quality of life. The arts also mean business. A recent report from the Americans for the Arts show that for every dollar spent on the arts, there is a return on investment for $7 in the community. So the arts do fuel economic prosperity. I also want to acknowledge the fellow arts organizations that could not be here tonight, and some of them we are here. We have the Ames Area Woodturners, Ames Chamber Artists, Ames Community Arts Center, Ames Community Theater, the Ames History Museum, Ames International Orchestra Festival Association, the Ames Mural Project, the Ames Writers Collective, the City of Ames Public Arts Commission, the Creative Artist Studios of Ames, Friends of Ames String, the Gallery in the Round, Iowa Artists, the ISU Department of Music and Theater, KHOI Community Radio, ISU College of Design, Kids Commotion, the Royal Scottish Dancers, Stevens Auditorium, Story Theater Company, the School of Dance, University Museums, Iowa State University, and Wellspring Wellness. So we want to thank you so much for the local support, and we know that there are plenty of options here in Ames to experience the arts. So please check out multiple websites, stop by the Octagon Center. We have the big art festival coming over on Main Street on September 22nd, where many of these organizations will be participating as well as performing. So thank you so much for supporting the arts. We appreciate it. And here we have Anna McCracken with the Ames Writers Collective and Stan Ribby with Actors. So thank you.
Thank you. right, next we have a Pride Fest Day, and Sheila, are you going to come up here or not? Or Nikki? Right, come on up. Nikki and Katie. Whereas the national tradition of recognizing the Pride movement began as a collective protest for rights of the LGBTQIA plus individuals, and whereas in 1991, the city of Ames added non-discrimination protections for all its citizens, including sexual orientation, making discrimination illegal within the city limits, and whereas in 2007, the state of Iowa added non-discrimination protections for all Iowa citizens, including gender identity. And whereas the members of the LGBTQIA plus community contribute to the academic, economic, artistic, and social vitality of our community, and whereas the City of Ames welcomes all people to our community, including those with diverse sexual orientations and gender identities and expressions, and is committed to protecting their civil rights, and whereas the Ames Pride and the Ames Public Library will host Pride Fest on September 14th, 2024 from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Therefore, I, John A. Hale, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim Saturday, September 14th as Pride Fest Day in the City of Ames. I encourage all residents to recognize the contributions made to our community by the LGBTQIA plus community. All right, we'll move on to consent. Is there any item that council wishes to pull for consent tonight?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to pull item 12.
Okay, anything else? Hearing none, entertain a motion approving consent list item 12.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Tim?
Mayor, this is just a really cool item. This whole idea of a bike and pedestrian wayfinding guide has been something that we've been talking about for many years. I just wanted to highlight the fact that it is moving forward. And I just had one question maybe for staff, just to give us a sense of the time frame when residents would be able to start seeing these things around the city.
Thank you. So for the wayfinding signage that is described in the bike path master plan, we anticipate that once the council accepts the plan, then we need to acquire some equipment, specialized sign, plotter, laminator, cutter that can then produce full color signage to be able to start installing that out in the community. We have funding in the budget for that equipment, and I believe it's on order. So we could receive it as soon as October and begin producing the signage this fall.
Fantastic. If people have had a chance to experience bike trail systems in other communities where they have this signage, it makes a huge difference in terms of being able to access things. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight this. This is a great day for Ames. That's all I have.
I have a question too.
Oh, what?
I was glad you pulled this. Actually, I was going to do that as well. So not only is this the item for the wayfinding signage, but it's actually for the bike head master plan in its entirety. And so I just wanted to, I was hoping also just to draw that to people's attention that that this is that plan going into effect as well. And I was curious, I guess, about the timing of some of the first action steps that it mentions in the plan. So when might we see some of them? Like there was one I was curious about that seemed, a lot of them are in public works as realm. I see that. So I think I was curious about the safe routes to school. That was one that it says that the MPO should take up first. And so I just want to get it on our awareness then that we need to mention it at an MPO meeting. according to the document anyway, that was the next step, was for the MPO to take it up and then work with Public Works to get it together. Or, that was the one about safe routes to school. Anyway, there's a number of those sorts of things. Would it be okay to ask for a memo on a timeline of first steps moving forward? Okay, so I'll do that after the motion then on the bike ped master plan.
Right. Anything else?
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried.
I would move for a memo from staff just on some action steps that are recommended in the plan and when we might see those in a timeline.
Second.
All right. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. And move on to public forum. This is time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business that are not listed on the agenda. Yeah, I see that, Richard, you're interested in addressing council. You may begin.
Your happiness and demo better be important to me. It's like many years ago, one of the first things I talked about to the city government was I tried to add the Ames Tribune, and the Tribune was a pretty fair newspaper on my birthday. The government should do as all the citizens love, and it's like Gordon Schrader, who was a advertising department of the Tribune at the time, did not understand my ad, so I was going to pay him for it, and he had me go talk to David Kramer, who was the editor of the Ames Tribune at the time, who did not understand my ad either. And it's like they wouldn't take my money. Or I don't know whether they would or not, but it's like I was really upset by that, and it's like, it's one of the first places that I tried to put my money down my mouth. It's like that. It's like I love the government, and it's like I think they should do as all the citizens love.
Does anybody else like to address council under public forum? Introduce yourself and you may begin.
Hello, my name is Clark Colby, and I live on, 617, 621 Douglas Avenue, so the parking lot north of the public library, those two properties there. I just wanted to say thank you very much for starting the conversations with the $12,000 to start looking at the unhoused population in Ames. We have lived there just over 10 years and have noticed an increase in numbers around our house. We've, managed a lot of people around our house over the years. So thank you very much for doing that. And I'm excited to see where that goes in the near future and what we can do as a community to work on this. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Appreciate it. Anybody else? All right, so now we'll close public forum. We'll move on to item number 26, the Indoor Aquatic Center project update and construction years.
Evening, Mayor and City Council. So the memo that was provided in the packet talked about that we'll give an update on the Fitch Family Indoor Aquatic Center, and the council has had some interest in having representatives from Story Construction and RDG Planning and Design to provide an update. So what they're going to do is they'll give a little bit of an update on what has been happening, and then the second part of the memo does talk about some construction errors regarding the surge tanks and then the pump pit and the backwash basin as it relates to some insulation and the vapor barrier. So they'll talk about that and explain what happened as well. So this is Troy Turner from Story Construction and Brad Rodenberg with RDG Planning and Design.
Good evening. I'll get us started here. So part of this, I want to kind of open up the curtain behind the scenes to the construction process to get started. So in any project, any task on a project, there are 6 things that are necessary. There's information that's needed, materials, tools, equipment, people, and a work zone. Nothing gets built without those 6 things. And so information is really the foundation of a project. So it starts with the plans and specifications, but then after the project is bid, the contractors submit information on materials that will become a permanent part of the project. Those submittals generally are product data, shop drawings, and color selections. That covers most of it. And the thing that I like to say is really information's a foundation. Without the information, materials can't be ordered. If materials can't be ordered, there's no need for tools, equipment, people, or a work zone to do it. So why do I talk about information at this meeting? Well, that's a big thing that's been going on since the job bid. So on this project, we have identified or anticipated about 425 submittals for the materials. And to date, 276 of those submittals are closed, 120 are in process. And so in other words, 396 out of 425 are closed or in process. So much progress has been made on that. Another piece of information that becomes important are things called requests for information. So the contractors will have questions about the plans and specifications or intent. And to date, we've had 41 of those come in and get answered as well. So a lot of work that honestly people don't see going on projects that's so vitally important to a successful project. So now I'll draw attention to the photographs up on the screens. So that's the way the site looked before construction with the 2 existing buildings and a lot of parking lot. And there's 2 steps really highlighted in this photo. Obviously, there's demolition going on, and it's hard to detect, but right through the middle of the project, there were also an overhead power line and several communications cables that needed to be relocated. One thing about the demolition I'd point out is you can see that there's debris segregated in different piles. And what that is they're segregating materials so that they can be appropriately recycled. So one of the neat things about demolition in the construction industry is a lot of this material can be recycled in one way or another. And so that was what was going on there. And then the power line up the middle, one thing I'd really give kudos to the city on is the electrical department was very helpful in coming up with solutions on where to route it and very proactive on getting it routed. In particular, I'd commend Mark Imhoff. He was very helpful to that process. Much appreciated. It's having dealt with many power line relocations, this was probably the easiest one I've had in my career. Let's go to the next one. So this is in the midst of concrete foundations being constructed. So on the left-hand side of the screen, or what's the southern half of the site, you can start to see the outline of the building. One thing that's not readily apparent on this photo, on that far west side, you can see an excavator or tractor sitting there. And before these foundations went in, there are quite a few utilities that need to be brought out from the public right away into the property, which included storm sewer, sanitary sewer, and water service. So that step also is highlighted in this photograph. And this is a more recent photo of almost all the foundations complete. We're right done at this point, but very close to completion at this point. So one thing, as you've read in the memo, let me back up. One thing I do want to highlight before I get to that. So all this work I've highlighted so far included excavation. And since this site has some contaminated soil in the northeast corner, that's a sensitive subject. So as excavations have been taking place, we've been sampling the soil and testing that for the presence of contamination. And to date, we haven't found any samples that tested positive. So that's good news.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of excavation behind us. Is there risk or excavations in the future? There are. We've got quite a bit of it behind us, so that's good news. The thing I'd add to that is there's really been very little groundwater present. And that's been a good thing, not only for makes construction easier, but it also minimizes the fact that petroleum could flow towards the work. So that's been good. And then, as you saw in the memo today, or for this meeting, there was a construction error. I can point to the picture on where it's at. So, kind of in the lower left-hand corner, you see that yellow material. The yellow material is a vapor barrier. And the reason that vapor barrier was selected for this project was due to the contamination. The study looked at what are the hazards, potential hazards and risks of this project being here. And they're rated low, medium, and high. And there's always a potential that if there's migration of that contamination, it could send vapors up into the building. Highly unlikely, but as a belt and suspenders step, that vapor barrier was called out in this project. So it goes beneath all the flatwork slabs and then up the walls of the pool basins to kind of encapsulate the whole building to mitigate that potential risk. So the surge tank are the tanks where that yellow material is visible. Unfortunately, the next pour, which is the pump pit and the backwash basin, which is just to the north, that concrete's real dark colored. That concrete had just been placed. That's why it's that color. Unfortunately, the bid package contractor neglected or omitted installing that vapor barrier underneath that structure. I wish we would have caught it before the concrete was poured, and certainly the bid package contractor does as well. But we did find it shortly thereafter, notified the contractor that day. They knew right away that was a serious error, and quite frankly haven't fought the fact that they need to remove and replace that concrete so that vapor barrier can get installed. So that's what I've got for an update, Keith.
Brad, you want to talk about the insulation aspect?
Yeah, as far as the insulation below the pits, the concrete slabs in those pits was shown on the aquatics drawings, inadvertently shown on the aquatics drawings when they're going to pour the concrete, the footings and foundations. They're working off the structural drawings, which didn't show that insulation under the slabs, or did architectural. Hence why they installed it without the insulation under the slabs. And upon reviewing that, we don't feel like there's any thermal value to that insulation under the slabs, and structurally would be better to not bear on that insulation as well. So we're not requiring them to, once the work that is in place that needs to be removed is removed, we're not going to install that insulation, but we're going to ensure that the vapor barrier is around that tank in its entirety. So I think some of the process speaks to just the checks and balances that are in place between story construction and RDG, as far as recognizing when there's an issue, bringing it up with the design team and then the owner, and then working through finding a solution. And in this case, we know that work's going to be removed and then replaced per the drawings themselves. So we feel good about that, and it still kind of works into the schedule accordingly.
So we're not looking for city council to make any decisions regarding this. They kind of explain this, but at this point, if there are any questions that council members have for Story or RDG, Troy and Brad, now would be the time to ask them.
I just had one about the insulation that we don't need. What kind of a cost difference does that make? If we were originally quoted for it and now we don't have it, is there any cost savings there?
Yeah, for that area, it's about $1,000, I would say. It's a very small amount of square footage. There's still a lot of insulation that will be installed in other places of the building, just not over those square feet.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Do you maybe one of you two want to at least let them know that there is insulation on the vertical walls
Yeah.
of these? Just really the question is underneath.
Yeah, the insulation around the vertical walls for the pits themselves, and also around all the foundations we're seeing in these photos will be installed and have been installed accordingly.
Yeah, so one thing you can't detect in this photo, but if you follow that foundation all the way around the building, there's rigid insulation along those foundation walls all around that perimeter.
Yep.
So I have two questions. The first is, are there other areas where the vapor barrier is going to be installed?
Mhm. Yeah, so there are 3 pool basins on the project. Beneath those pool basins, there'll be vapor barrier. Then it goes up the walls. And then when you get to the grade level where the slab on grade is, it goes across that whole slab on grade. So it's, if you will, it's kind of like a bathtub when it's all done.
Yep.
Yep.
And then they'll turn it up at the edges when the concrete's poured, just to finish that tub, if you will.
Yeah.
So I guess I have 3 questions then.
All right.
What's the process to ensure that we don't have this mistake happen again
Yep.
with the other vapor barriers?
Yep. So one of the things we're working with staff on is, so there's a third-party inspection service on this project, and we're also putting together a building envelope quality control plan, and the vapor barrier is part of that envelope quality control plan. So there will be a third-party inspector for sure checking on that aspect of it, along with when they're checking reinforcing steel.
And that will happen definitely before there's any pouring that occurs.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we're getting close to being done with concrete for now. And certainly that quality control plan and inspector will be in place before we get to the next, say, batch of concrete we're pouring.
And the final question is, how does the tear out and replacement of the pump pit and the backwash basin impact the schedule for the job?
Yeah. So right now we're looking at precast showing up in the first half of November, and this work will be done ahead of that. So I guess we're fortunate to have a window to do it without impacting.
Thank you.
Other questions?
And just confirming that this will be done at the cost of the contracted to do this work
Yep.
with tear out.
Yeah. Excellent question. Yeah. So the cost of this removal and replacement is 100% borne by the bid package contractor. And to their credit, they haven't fought this a bit. Quite frankly, the day I found out about it, we called them and their first reaction was, yeah, that's not going to work. We're going to have to remove and replace that. Yes, you are. There's a 0% chance that this is going to be acceptable to the city of Ames.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that was,
Right, Tim.
So, couple of follow-ups. So, the main basin, when will that hole be done?
yeah, that'll actually happen with inside of the building envelope. So the precast walls will go up, structural steel for the roof will go on. So now you've got an envelope, and that's when the pool construction will start.
So there's, while I'm optimistic that what you've seen so far with respect to migration of water that's contaminated, we haven't seen that yet. So I'm very happy about that. but we still haven't dug the main basin. Is that correct?
That's correct. Of the three basins, two are very shallow, they're 4 or 5 foot or less. So that's up above the contamination.
Right.
The deep end of the lap pool would be down, getting into that depth of where that contamination was on the other side of the site. But we've dug a lot deeper on this site and haven't had issues. So we're optimistic that while we've got some excavation ahead of us, it's shallower than some of the stuff we've done already.
Yeah, that's encouraging. Thank you for that. I I need help in knowing if I'm majoring on a minor, so you can correct me for that. So the insulation that was not included, what the way this comes across today is that this is really a de minimis. This is a non-issue.
Not an issue. Yeah.
But just help me understand, and maybe Mayor, with your background, you can help me out.
Yeah.
So
I can take a stab at
well,
it.
let me try this question. So if we had a time machine, and which would be really fun to have, if we had a time machine and we went back in time, would the plans have included this insulation, or would it not include the insulation, and why?
Yeah, would not have included the insulation underneath the slabs of the pits on the vertical walls. There's no real thermal value. Structurally, it's better to not have the insulation there, just for that concrete to sit on something firm.
Okay. So as it turns out, there shouldn't have been, if we did things normally, there would not have been this insulation at the bottom, and the fact that it was built without it is actually a good thing. Am I saying that right?
Right, because they're building typically structural footings and foundations are built from the structural drawings, which didn't show the insulation, and that insulation only showed up within the aquatics drawings sections through that area. So that's why they built it without the insulation.
So it sounds like this is actually a good thing.
Yes.
Sometimes we make mistakes that are actually in our favor, and that's what this is. You might appreciate the fact that this city is very sensitive to issues of contractor mistakes. We are up to here with this as a community, and so poor Keith and us, and so we're a little gun shy, a little choppy on this, and so I'd like to carry on with Gloria's question about the third-party inspection process. So this site has challenges. It's not a perfect site. And we had a robust community conversation to say, we're going to do this anyway. And what's really critical is that there are certain safety measures that engineering is recommending to help keep our people safe. So I would like you to expand just a little more about the way in which these third-party inspectors are going to be employed. This is a critical component, and I'd like you to just give us a little more detail.
Sure. Well, so what we've been working on is putting what would be known as a building envelope quality control plan together. And within that plan, there are going to be certain elements that we want that third party to inspect. And that vapor barrier is definitely one of those. So they'll come out pre-pour before they install the reinforcement above the vapor barrier and check A to make sure it's there. But then also, are there any punctures in it, tears in it? Are the penetrations of pipe and so forth adequately dealt with so that it's a continuous membrane, even though it's being penetrated by those pipes? Certainly internal to story. This is something, boy, we sure wish we would have noticed this before they poured the concrete. So we definitely have a heightened sense of awareness of that's a mistake on our part. We could have headed this off before it happened.
And so will there be any kind of memorialization of the inspection? So I would like to think that there would be photographs taken and documentation of that third-party inspection. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, that is very accurate. So anytime there's sort of an inspection done, there's a report that comes with it, whether it's looking at reinforcing steel or what's the bearing capacity of the soil or what's the compaction. In this case, when they come out and do their inspections, absolutely, there's a report that goes with it, and it's memorialized in writing and becomes part of the project records.
That's all I have. Thank you for the answers.
What questions? How do we know, or how do you know that there's a vapor barrier underneath the surge tank?
Yeah, we've got photographic evidence of that. And my people definitely verified it's there pre-pour. But I myself have seen the photographs, and yes, it's there.
You mentioned this third-party building envelope quality control person. What precipitated that? If they're going to be inspecting the rebar, why weren't they on board prior to the work that actually required an inspection of rebar and vapor barrier in place?
Yeah, I would say originally going back to pre-construction last fall, something that hit the agenda during pre-con was we need to hire a commissioning agent. And that's not, those folks are not in place yet. On the HVAC side, that commissioning agent, the proposals were due here just recently. And I believe that purchasing's very close to making the selection on that. On the building envelope side, it's too late for commissioning services. They needed to be on board, say, last September. However, it's not too late to put a quality control plan together to really get, I'd say, the most bang for your buck when it comes to building envelope, to where they can really take a look at that whole building envelope and make sure it's tight. And so we've had discussions about, here's what we think the scope needs to be. I've recommended that be added to the existing third-party inspection because they're fully capable of that. But purchasing's going through that to see if that would be acceptable or not, or if they need to go out with an RFP or RFQ to take independent proposals.
So who's paying for this third-party inspection?
City of Ames does.
And was expected and budgeted?
Yeah, that's normal. And I would say International Building Code would suggest that the owner should contract with those third parties directly. And it shouldn't be anybody else to get rid of any level of impropriety that could be out there.
So help me understand the role that Story's playing then in terms of during construction.
Yeah.
Because I believe the contract requires that you're verifying that things are being built according to plans and specifications. And I'm not taking issue with the building envelope quality control person from the standpoint that we have a very complicated building. One that highly requires, properly functioning HVAC system. We always have condensation, all kinds of issues. So windows, glazing, caulking, doors, the whole 9 yards. But where does what's Story's role?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So I'd say it goes back to the pre-construction phase. So we dove into the plans and specifications pretty deeply. We had a lot of questions, brought up a lot of issues to the point people are probably tired of hearing from us. So that was kind of the first tip of the spear to try and head off things while it's still words or lines on paper. During construction, we do have pre-installation meetings with the contractors. We did have a pre-installation meeting on that particular structure. Went over the need for vapor barrier on it. First pour went fine. Why we didn't catch it on the second one, I don't have a leg to stand on there, Mr. Mayor. We should have seen that.
I'm more perplexed as to why the subcontractor.
Excuse me.
I'm more perplexed by the fact that the subcontractor before the first one did it, included it. And what gives me concern is that are there other things that they're not putting in that they should be doing? Because it's clearly shown in the drawings that was reviewed as part of the pre-installation. So I mean, there seemed to be when you start having these things come up, you start scratching your head saying, okay, what's missing because the chain's only as strong as the weak one.
Yep. To my knowledge, nothing else is missing. Everything's there. I know for sure the reinforcing steel's been inspected by the third-party inspector and the city building department and Story. So we feel confident about that.
And the water stuff.
Water stuff, yep. Um, I just found this out this week, but the foreman that was leading that work, his wife was ill with cancer and subsequently passed away last week. So I have no doubt that he probably wasn't of the clearest of minds. That's not an excuse, but it is reality, things that we deal with in life. But ultimately, it's a bid package contractor's responsibility to build it per plans and specifications. There's a lot of people that come alongside of them to try and help them be successful at that, whether it's a design professional, construction manager, City of Ames, third-party inspectors. We're all there trying to help them be successful. And this is a case where we just didn't do it quite as timely as we wanted to.
Well, our condolences to the gentleman who lost his wife, and you're right, it's reality. So Brahman asked a question about the value of the installation. Was that installation in the bid that was submitted to the city? And if it is that going to be reflected in a change order deduct then?
Yeah, at some point, probably what should be.
And you mentioned about the fact that the precast won't be showing up until early November. Can you just comment on a forward view schedule-wise in terms of what I think we talked about, or you showed in your work required that construction will be complete sometime mid-late fall next year. So hopefully ribbon cutting and taking the first dive and sometime in November.
Yeah.
I think Keith's going to be the first one going on the slide if I remember correctly. But anyway, where does
Steve?
or Steve, right? Is who gets the short straw. Where does the project? We haven't seen any kind of a bar chart to show where it stands. And can you comment on that?
I'd say the precast is showing up later than we'd hoped. We're going through trying to evaluate that right now, what that means for the rest of the project. In lieu of the precast showing up later than we'd hoped, we have actually gone in and installed some of the deeper pipe in the pool basins that really wasn't planned to be done until the building envelope was up. So we're trying to cut out as much work as we can later and take advantage of that now. And then we've got a series of meetings, particularly with the building director and the pool contractor here over the next 2 weeks to kind of get through some of that to see where we stand for sure.
Back to your quality control. Is there responsibility also I'm sorry, commissioning agent? That person's not in place yet, correct?
Correct.
And so have the mechanical shop drawings been reviewed and approved already, pre-commissioning agent having a chance to look at them and offering input?
Correct.
So what happens if the commissioning agent says, I don't think this is really a good idea. This is not going to work well. Who pays for the changes since equipment's being ordered?
Right.
Because we're hiring that individual to protect our interests. It just seems that may be a piece that should be in place in order to ensure that. Because again, we all want the same thing: a successful project, not having condensation, not having issues with it. But we're not building it. We all know. A storage shed, it's a very complicated building. So can you comment on that, please?
Yeah, I think there's obviously multiple ways to build and design those systems for a building like this. And a lot of what we work through from a design within the design phase standpoint. So when a commissioning agent's brought on sometimes later in the game, a lot of that commissioning is on the back end as far as making sure those pieces of equipment are up and operating like they should from an efficiency standpoint. And they will also give suggestions as far as just the overall design of the system. But we would rely on the design that's currently in place based on what we work through within the design phases. If that makes sense.
Well, again, I'm a little perplexed as to why Story or RDG didn't tell Keith or our staff, hey, let's get a commissioning agent on ASAP because they need to be part and parcel of the review of these documents. That's the cheapest time to catch errors or issues or things that is above our pay grade. That's for sure.
Yeah. But honestly, it hit the agenda during pre-construction phase last September. We did alert the team, hey, we need these people.
Well, council passes on resolutions to spend money. I don't participate in that. I have a very hard time supporting any kind of changes that should be made in order to make the system successful. And I just think that that person needs to be on board and do a review as soon as possible.
Yeah. If I was in owner's shoes, absolutely, I'd have a hard time paying for that.
The other thing is that council under consent accepted, because it's already been approved, a large raft of change orders and close to $100,000 on the project. And can you just explain what you see Story's role in reviewing these things? Because I've been under the hood for 40 years. I understand how things work. And the point is, if there's scope changes that are asked for, fair game. Underground stuff, rubble you found, understand that.
Yep.
But some of the change orders, I have asked for additional documentation, understand it, and it's already been approved. So it's just help me understand, help the council understand what role are you playing to ensure that these are legitimate and are not essentially coordination issues or things that really is not the responsibility of the city or any client to pay.
I'd say part of this goes back to pre-construction. So we headed off a lot of issues that, quite frankly, could have been change orders during the construction process. So did we eliminate a lot of changes at that point? Absolutely, we did. Are we perfect? No, we're not. So, like you said, a lot of the changes so far have been obvious changes in scope. So, like foundations of buildings that were unknown and undocumented in the southwest corner of the property. So that's legitimate. Do you guys see every change that comes to us? Absolutely not. There are times that we get requests from contractors where we just shut them down right now, and it doesn't even make it to the city's purview. So there's been some of that. We've had some changes where prices have come in, and most certainly we've given pushback, and that price is not reasonable. And here's why we think that. And so there's some revisions like that. We've got one going on now that I think will just be a flat out rejection. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, what I didn't hear was looking at the fact in terms of were these coordination issues that should have been caught by the architect or the mechanical engineer, structural engineer, or consultant, because the point is that's their responsibility for quality control and their preparation and drawings and specifications.
So I would say, I would want to look at that on a one-by-one individual basis with you. Let's say have a discussion about that. The other thing I would say too, going back to my whole spiel on information, we're at that point in the project where all these submittals are going back and forth. And there's a lot of things that come to light then. So on a new construction like this, that submittal process is usually when you uncover issues. And so we're in that steep period of submittal review. And so we're in that steep period of issues coming up. Once we get through that submittal phase on new construction, then in my experience, it levels out because you've gotten through all the information. You're not in a retrofit remodel situation, so you're not uncovering undiscovered things. Like everything's new, and so you start to run out of issues once you transition out of that submittal phase and you're fully into construction. That's the way I would anticipate things going.
Help us explain what you mean by uncovering issues. What are the impact or obviously that's responsibility of coordinating and making sure things work properly. What do you mean by issues?
Let me think of one specific one.
If you're just saying it's just one, it's coordinating between the drawings and the submittal,
Yeah.
and that's just it. That's fine. We can move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the drawings and the specs show design intent, right? And the submittals and the shop drawings are showing us, Story Construction, the owner, the design team, how that contractor is going to go out and build that. So it's just making sure that those drawings that they're providing follow the design intent of the contract documents.
So we're not talking about issues being cost changes. We're talking about, okay.
Yeah.
Last question. Where do we stand with the approval from the state? It's my understanding we weren't even going to start until you got approval from the state. Is that correct? And we're good to go?
We've got the permit.
What does that mean?
So the state of Iowa has issued the permit. They still have some, you can bring it better than I can, actually.
Yeah, so the state reviews anything from a product standpoint. I know you guys are all very familiar with that in one way or another. So we do have a building permit number from them, which allows us to proceed with construction on the pool pieces of the project. They've provided comments to us based on their review of the drawings and things that we've addressed, and we've sent a letter back to them as well on how we are going to address those items moving forward. And we're still looking to hear as far as a follow-up from the gentleman at the state.
So what does the permit imply? That they reviewed the plan specifications and but for exceptions or questions or clarifications?
Right, yeah. So through that review, reveals any comments or questions they have that we can either point to something and say, here it is, or yeah, we will address that in this manner by this date.
Which these should all be minimal because the point
Right,
was
and they are.
Water's Edge came to the making that with them, which is standard practice.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys were doing that. You know what you're
Yep.
doing. You know how to do it. So
So we've been in touch with the state multiple times. We have heard back from them as far as the responses we've sent back to the comments that they did have. So we're just looking for their final approval on, oh, that's how you're going to solve those comments that we had, and then right before the pool is open, the water's in the pool, they'll come back and do the final review and give us a certificate of operation essentially, and away we go.
So these are minor, you said, in nature, so they're basically non-cost change.
Right. Yeah. I think we'll have to review a few of them, but I don't think there was anything in there that would involve costs that they would.
The things that involve cost have been addressed in a change order already. So
unpack that for us.
Yeah. So there were changes. Pool bench.
Oh, yeah. There was one of them was with the wellness pool. We do have jets in the pool and the length of the bench. That was one of the comments that we needed the bench needed to be a little bit shorter if we were going to have jets, and there were some of those kinds of things there. They did bring back. We initially had water temperature for the wellness pool of 90 to 92. And they said if you're over 90 degrees, then it's a therapy pool, and you have a whole different set. So we have just set that we won't go higher than 90 degrees. So there's some of those kinds of changes in the initial review that there were some in regards to depth markers.
So
those kinds of
these are minor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Talking about 2-bit type stuff. I mean, not a quarter. I mean, it's a sense with inflation, but anyway.
The one issue that's out there is the city's asked for a variance on CO2 storage, and that we need confirmation back from the state on what is going to be acceptable, and then off of that, Water's Edge can design those tanks. So right now there is some CO2 tanks that in the future will need to be priced place, because right now they're not included as part of the project because we don't have approval from the state of Iowa for those. So
It's for bulk storage. Uh, it's for bulk storage. That's what we want. Rather than bringing in these cylinders that you see, the bulk storage makes a lot more sense. And so that's what we're waiting.
yeah, and we didn't want the city to buy tanks at the beginning of the job, assuming that it was going to work, and then find out they're not. And now you've wasted money on tanks that aren't going to be acceptable.
Is that the same system that's used at the high school? High school pool?
Yes. Yep, they have bulk storage.
So the point is
And
that
they
it's
did
just
get
when
the
it's getting
variance.
approval, it's not basically starting something which has not been done before.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. As I think you mentioned, or Troy mentioned, there's no action necessary on.
Correct.
Yeah, Keith, and I think the plan is to continue these updates with photos and schedule as we move along here, whether that's monthly or we can determine how often.
I think it'd be helpful to have
Absolutely.
monthly written updates, that's for sure. Now, whether
Okay.
they're in person, every other month or every third month or whatever. And maybe if you're getting closer to construction or completion, maybe more information. Photographs are helpful also.
What we can do is, and even with the monthly project highlights, we usually that go out. We usually put something there as well in regards to what progress is being made. But the next report will make sure to include the schedule, and that you asked about. We'll make sure that gets put in there. If the end date will be affected or not with some of the things that Troy and Brad talked about.
Do you anticipate that the delay in precast is going to delay the completion date?
I think there's a possibility of that.
What is your current completion date shown as?
I think it was mid-November.
So how much of a slip is that going to be?
Yeah, that's what we'll figure it out.
I just think it's important that council knows, but also that our community knows in terms of that, so that people aren't standing outside with their bathing suits, 2 months in advance, essentially. But I just think communication is important, and as Tim said, there's a reason for. I think.
Yeah, and I would say it's very recent that precast is approved, and we figured out what the final lead time is for those materials, so we're reacting to that information currently.
Are there any other forecast delays in equipment?
No, not right now. We've started to have steel show up on site, which is a critical component. We're getting through HVAC, electrical, and pool equipment pretty well. So right now, I'm not seeing anything else that I think is an issue.
One last comment I would make there is, you talked about, and we mentioned in the memo about being transparent and bringing these issues forward. Now, I did receive an email from a resident thanking staff and city council for bringing this to attention, so they the residents can be kept abreast and understand what's going on with the project.
Right. Very good. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Run under 27.
Yeah, so with this one, we're going to bring Joshua Thompson up, our Parks and Facilities Superintendent, and he's going to walk you through the agility course.
Good evening. Council action form describes two projects that are going to take place or proposed to take place at Car Park. One is the agility course, which was originally approved in October of 2021, to be placed at Car Park. And the second one was a shelter/restroom that was included as part of the 22 and 23 and then 23-24 CIP projects. Current available funding total for those is $735,468. But prior to the placement of the agility course in Car Park, we held a couple public engagement sessions with the Car Park neighborhood. First thing we did was we sent out a postcard to about 180 households, just outlining the projects, and then also setting a schedule for an online meeting. Only approximately 8 people showed up for the meeting online. Shortly thereafter, we held or heard some additional feedback, whether it was phone calls or emails from neighbors that were, just wanted more information about the project. Maybe they had some concerns, and then some additional questions as well. So staff sent out a letter to approximately 400 individuals outlining the project, getting more descriptive, including pictures, links to what agility course equipment was or is. And then we also held another public meeting at Homewood Golf Course where 35 people or 35 individuals showed up. After that meeting, we heard, multiple comments for and against the project. And then, through the October approval of 21, described what we heard and how we plan to address some of those issues. So where we're at today is we hired Snyder and Associates to do an engineering and site plan for the project, but we were going to include both of them. The engineer's cost estimate came back for both projects at $1.1 million. Current available funding for the projects is, like I said, $735,000. Staff has worked through multiple iterations on how we can get this going, and so moving forward, staff is recommending an alternative to complete the agility course, but also adding a shelter, but not do the restroom at this time. But also hearing from the public some of the issues and concerns that they had questions about, for instance, a continuous sidewalk connecting that goes through the site. Obviously, they wanted the bathhouse demolished. They want to make sure that we're using efficient use of the parking lot, just so that we can, use it effectively, and then also make sure that we're maintaining the equipment properly. So there's all four alternatives described in the packet. Staff's recommendation is alternative number one. And the last comment I'll make is, in order to go forward, we told the neighborhood that we were going to hold one more public meeting to let them know what the final project was going to be, to tell them that we were addressing their questions and their concerns, to make sure that that they've been heard, and we're including the things that they would like to have done. So, any questions?
I would maybe just add real quick is a timeline for this is pending approval from City Council tonight for direction. We move through. We'd have the public meeting as quickly as possible, and then we would bid this out this fall for construction next spring.
I have a question on this. I'm very excited about this project. I've been hoping for this for 10 years. It's going to be a great addition. But it just seems so stinking expensive to build a shelter restroom. So this is at am I reading this correctly? Is it 400,000?
That's correct.
Like we should be able to build a house for that. We've got a builder in the audience. Maybe he could help us think through this. But doesn't it just seem like an outrageous amount for a restroom? So walk us through why is it $400,000 to build? We wonder why you can't build affordable housing. We can be building a restroom for $400,000.
Yeah, and when we built the new restroom at Ines Grove, that was just about 300,000.
Yep.
Right there, and that was 5 years ago, something like that. 5-6 years ago. So with the cost of materials that have gone, crazy during the pandemic and so on, it's just one of those.
It's just not that big.
No, they're not that big, and we're not saying that we agree with the cost, but just based on what we have paid for other restrooms, and with it, it's just what it is. We were talking to somebody the other day, and just we were telling them what we pay for the concrete, for example. A private contractor was saying what they pay for concrete, and we're about 20-25% more for concrete. And I don't know what it is, but it's the reality. And when we talk to other people, other colleagues around the state, this is what they're paying as well. So it's not just in Ames; it's across the state what people are paying for these things.
I was up at Inus Grove last weekend, and I was in the restroom, and it's a nice restroom, but this is not a posh and very fashionable restroom. It's a pretty Spartan restroom. No offense.
That's
It's
fine.
just,
And they have to be like
and that's
that.
fine. And it just, you're going to pay 400,000. Okay, there we go. My ranting is done, but it's just a lot.
I'm not making this as a concession to what you're saying. We totally agree with what you're saying. But one of the things that we did hear from the neighbors when we met with them is that they would prefer some type of bathroom facility. I know that a portable restroom is not the most luxurious type of, but that has eased some of the issues and concerns from the neighbors. And we've had that in place since those meetings. Those have been about 2 years year round. So portable, yeah, portable, yeah.
The challenge of staff is looking at see if there's a reduction in cost there. Want to make sure it has the durability and the correctness that you're seeking in a restroom. But it may be a prefab building, may be less costly.
Yeah.
So we got to explore that and see if there's any difference in the stick build.
Yep. Thanks.
But the key is we're leaving that off this bid. Okay.
Right.
We're going ahead. If bids come in, we'll be able to have enough money to build a shelter, the agility course, and we'll put a KIBO, a temporary facility out there. We'll have to deal with the restroom at a later date.
Thank you.
Yes, a quick question on that. On the council action form, it says it could be programmed into a future CIP if it still has merit. How was it determined that the restroom was needed in the first place, or its merit to include it in the CIP originally, and how would we determine later it still has merit?
Yeah. So one of the things, the reason that we were looking at a restroom there is that the agility course would get a lot of use. Okay, so typically our we do not put restrooms in neighborhood parks.
Yeah.
So which is we would consider car park a neighborhood park. But we also have cross country skiing, in the winter time and when we have snow available. And because of East River Valley, which is almost more like a community park, with the size of it. So that's what we looked at is why we wanted to put a restroom there. And we had talked about making this a year-round restroom, and insulated and so on because of the cross-country skiing. So what Joshua mentioned is the portable restroom has served the need. It's not the best option. So I think when we look at merit, is it still needed with it, or is portable restroom, which is a much more affordable option, process operations? So I think that's what we're kind of looking at is if this serves the need. We do, Roosevelt Park during the summertime. We built an enclosure. We have a portable restroom there. Now with that one, the Friends of Roosevelt Park, they pay for it. So they have it for their concert. So sometimes we have done that in neighborhood parks. So I think when we look at merit, we just got to continually look at that, and is the need being met or not being met, and that will help us determine if we should do more than the portable restroom.
Gotcha. Thank
you. Yep. Questions?
There will be water there.
Yeah, so it'll include a water fountain with a
Okay.
dog bowl, and it's typical what we do in other parks.
Nice, thanks.
Right. Motion.
I would move option one.
Second.
Thank you. Any closing comments? Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Joshua.
All right.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
All right, move on to item number 28. Corey?
Good evening. This morning, we took bids on our 24-25 general obligation bonds to support the city's capital improvement plan. As you might remember, some of the capital projects included in our schedule with the Indoor Aquatic Center of about $16.7 million, some intelligent
for transportation system improvements, about $476,000. Improvements to the 8A drill system for $700,000, and then airport entryway improvements for $680,000. So this morning about 10 o'clock, we took some bids. We ended up getting 4 bids. Tonight with me, I have Suzanne Gerlach from PFM. She's the city's financial advisor, and she's here to give you those results and then answer questions you might have. Thank you.
Right. So first of all, congratulations on the AA1 rating that was affirmed by Moody's Investor Service. That is the top tier of the AA category. So congratulations for that. These bonds were issued as 20-year bonds. Traditionally, the CIP bonds were issued for 12 years, but with the Aquatic Center and with special projects, the city has a policy of doing 20-year term for these larger, more substantial projects. So today, 20-year bonds with an average life of just over 10 years. We received 4 bids from 33 different banks. The true interest cost ranges from 3.59% to 3.77%. To give you a little bit of context, last year, the 12-year bonds were at 4.04%. So very favorable rates today. Very pleased with the rates we got today. The winning bid came from Janie Montgomery Scott out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They bid alone. And they were at 3.5983%. That is an aggregated interest rate over the 20-year life of the bonds. And the net interest cost for that 20-year term is $7,655,750.12. When we compare that to the second place bid came from Robert W. Baird and Syndicate. They had a 30-member selling syndicate, and that came in 7 basis points higher, 3.66%, and that 7 basis points saved the city $81,387 for bonds. When we look at how your bonds price compared to other bonds in the municipal market, you price 34 basis points on average of the AAA scale. And so that is a combination ranging from in municipal bonds every single year gets its own coupon and price, and ranged from 11 basis points to 777 basis points over the AAA scale, which is very good to me. So excellent pricing, excellent results, and good news for the taxpayers of the city of Ames. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions?
So what does this tell? This is great news for taxpayers. We don't do this very often, and so can you give us some perspective? What does this tell us about our city's finances? You're sort of an outside way of evaluating how we're doing. Can you give us some sense of that?
Yeah, so Moody's ratings are a measure of risk and financial, and when they measure risk, they're telling the municipal bond market the credit quality, just like your personal credit quality, it has all the different factors that go into it. As a city, there's AAA, AA, single A, BAA, and then we don't talk about what's below that. Non-investment grade, we'll call it that. The city of Ames is at the very top rating for the AA category, right below the AAA category, which is one notch below the top rating you can get. That says that you have strong tax base. The report specifically called out the low unemployment rate, the tax base diversity you have here of different larger employers. The university, obviously, Iowa State University's presence here, strong institutional presence. You have you have a lot of stability in your tax base due to city, hospital, county, university, all the different things that are municipal. They're sort of recession proof, if you will. It goes into a lot of the city's financial policies, the city's financial wherewithal, general. The cash balances are looked at, trends of actuals versus budget, how you budget, how you perform against your budget annually is part of that score, policies and procedures. Debt is a part of it, your low pension obligations, the low debt you have for the city your size related to your peers. I'm trying to think what else is in there. And then 20% of the score is actually based on the state laws that the city of Ames operates in the state of Iowa. And there's a score for the financial flexibility that a city has to repay debt. And in Iowa, that is rated in the AA category for cities, because your debt service levy is unlimited in rate or amount. And so that gives you.
That was an amazing answer. And this is a good place for us to say thank you to our city manager
Yes.
and to Corey for the work.
Yes.
This isn't an accident, and there are a lot of cities that would love to be in this spot. And so thank you for your work, and thank you, Steve and Corey, for your work in helping us stay on course.
Other questions? I have one that's totally disconnected
Okay.
from this. What would happen if the legislature would cap a city's ability to increase their debt levy above a certain limit? What would that do to the bond rating? In your opinion, I know it's
yeah. So in Nebraska, there is a statutory cap, and so I like to work with some clients in Nebraska. It depends on how they do it, how close the city of Ames would be to that cap, and the remaining authority. So you can still be a AA1 and be capped as to rate into amount, depending on how close you are to the cap. They're going to really look hard at your CIP. The city of Ames does amazing. You have, the CIP that you have online, the budget that you have online, the very detailed information. And so that 5-year outlook becomes even more important when we're talking about a cap. So I would say it's not impossible, but for the cities that do reach or are closer to that cap, it would be much more difficult to maintain. The state portion of the score, like I said, it would really depend on how they did it. Right now in Iowa, your legal limit is set on 5% of your 100% value. If they were to say, so schools in Iowa are capped at a dollar amount. The voters, it's what is it, 270 unless the voters say 405. They still issue GEO bonds and that are unlimited. They have they call it the unlimited full faith and credit, because at the time they're issued, they can't exceed 405. But if there's an instance your valuation were to decline and you went over the 405, you are obligated to then levy over the 405. So there are measures that are safeguards in the schools that I would hope would be similar for a city that would provide that truly unlimited. Otherwise, you're in a limited GO, which is a notch down as far as pricing and all of the things go.
So that affect just the credit rating and then also affect
the pricing.
Mm-hmm. So it increase the cost to the taxpayer to.
Yeah, if you are truly operating in a limited GO, that would be considered one notch below your unlimited full faith and credit, so it would automatically be a notch down, almost automatically. From a credit perspective.
Yeah. So if you're seeing that schools, cities or your clients in Nebraska are not seeing quite as favorable interest rates?
Well, that's a more complicated question than
okay.
That's a lot more complicated. Just I will say that it is not impossible to be a triple. I work with a county in Nebraska that is AAA rated and operates in that environment because they're not even halfway to their statutory limit. Okay. So it's all about how you leverage it. And cities aren't able to do GO bonds like we are here in Iowa, in Nebraska, so it's very different. But yeah.
Thank you. Sorry for the bunny trail, but
no, I'm here. That's what I'm here to answer questions. So yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you for the thorough explanation and for getting good numbers for us.
Congratulations.
We'll open up public comment. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Is there a motion on resolution authorizing and approving loan agreement, providing the sale and issuance of general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2024A, and providing for the levy of taxes to pay for the same?
So moved.
Great. Thank you. Roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And just point of clarification before you leave, Mark, do we need to officially accept this particular bid, or is that motion adequate to take care of it? Thank you. Have a good evening. Thank you. All right, move on. Item number 29, resolution awarding contract to Carl Ford, Storage City, round of $86,932 for two 2025 Ford Lightning pickups. Good evening.
All right. Cool. So my name is Nolan Sagan. For those of you who have not had the chance to meet yet, I'm the sustainability coordinator here for the city, going on about a month and a half now. That's very exciting. So council award contract for two vehicles. So two light duty vehicles. Now they're up on their regular replacement schedule. It was identified by staff based on the size of the vehicles and the intended use that these would be great candidates to replace with electric pickups. So a little bit of background. On the municipal fleet, so currently there are 14 hybrid vehicles and 6 electric vehicles in the fleet, including 2 of these F-150 Lightning pickups that were purchased earlier this year, and staff has received very positive feedback on the use of those vehicles. They like how they operate. Um, and then we're looking at a lower total cost of ownership over the lifetime of the vehicle compared to a traditional internal combustion engine. So compared to a typical F-150, look at the useful lifetime being about 10 years for the city. So how much we use that vehicle. We look at the Inflation Reduction Act and the $7,000 refund that we expect to receive from that, and then the cost of fuel, gasoline versus electricity, and the slightly lower cost of maintenance over those 10 years, looking at a lower total cost of ownership for the electric pickup compared to a comparable model that has an internal combustion engine. And then in addition to that, so this actually would be aligned with the climate action plan, which is a priority, and the 7 initial implementation steps that were identified by staff. One of those is to electrify the municipal fleet, so this is in alignment with those implementation steps and with the climate action plan because of the emission reductions associated with these vehicles. So again, if we make that comparison over the 10 years compared to internal combustion engine, we're looking at about a 75% emission reduction with the electric vehicles. So that's impactful. And it's for those reasons that staff recommends alternative number 1, which is to award the bid. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions?
One minor question. Welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
So with our buses, the cost of replacing the batteries is $200,000. So we have to think about budgeting for that waste, just to make sure that we're appropriately anticipating those. Do we build in a cost of battery replacement with these vehicles as well?
We would consider that standard maintenance. There's a little bit of uncertainty. Electric vehicles have not been around as long as the internal combustion engine, so there's a little bit of uncertainty on the maintenance costs and how many miles we would expect the battery to last. But we would consider that regular maintenance for the vehicles.
Okay.
I was astounded how cheap these were. I mean, a Ford Lightning is usually over $70,000. So I think it seems like we're getting a really good deal, but that's just me.
Right.
Just a quick question. Where's the charging infrastructure for these vehicles? Do these departments already have chargers set up, or is there going to be new infrastructure for these?
So these vehicles will utilize existing charging infrastructure, but we are considering that in the long-term plan to electrify the fleet to ensure that there is charging available.
Cool.
I want to say something.
I'll just quickly add to that. So these, one of these vehicles is going to the water treatment plant facility staff, and so they're looking at putting charging infrastructure there as well. So that will come for it as well.
Over public comments. Anyone that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, close public comment. Entertain a motion on resolution awarding the contract to Carl Ford to Story City in the amount of $86,932 for 2 2025 Ford F-150 Lightning pickups.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Move on to item number 30, downtown facade grant changes for rear facades and maintenance.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Last month, Council considered a request from Scott Mormon of Mormon Clothier to consider changes to the downtown facade program, including for making the rear facades of the buildings eligible for the grant program and including maintenance as an eligible activity. Currently, neither of these things are eligible. This is the map of the eligibility area. Council at that meeting directed staff to return with language that expands the grant program to cover the rear of facades of buildings that contribute to the Main Street National Register Historic District, and to expand the program language to include structural improvements. In discussing the first of Council's directives, the making rear facades eligible for the existing program, staff did look in depth at the current requirements and how those would apply to the rear of the buildings. The program as it is currently conceived has guidelines that were developed with Main Street in mind, with the period of historic significance in mind. The rear of buildings were designed to be utilitarian, and they don't have, for instance, recessed entries with kick plates and transom windows and so forth. It would be difficult to apply the program as it currently is to the rear of the buildings, as there would be very little eligible work that could be done, with the possible exception of some work related to windows and maybe removing any additions to the rear of the buildings that were not compliant with the design of the original design of the building. Also, determining what the design of the building was in the rear would also be difficult, as there just aren't as many pictures of what those buildings, of the backs of buildings look like. Staff also met with the inspections division to talk with our building official and assistant building official to talk about structural maintenance and what that would look like. And in our discussions, we identified three main things: maintaining exterior walls, foundation repair, and repairing of the roofs. The roofs come in because if the roof is not maintained properly, water can penetrate into the building, and that can lead to significant damage. We also discussed how we would evaluate a structural maintenance request, as the planning department does not have any structural engineers or architects. And as part of that, we discussed having, as a part of that application for a structural grant, submitting an evaluation from a certified professional who could evaluate how critical the work was, so that we could evaluate grants against one another in terms of prioritizing and so forth. The grant, as it's currently conceived, it's $23,000 matching grant with an additional $2,000 for design work. And as a part of our thinking on the maintenance, the $2,000 could be made eligible for this structural evaluation. At the previous meeting, it was discussed to have the rear facades and maintenance be only eligible to apply for the second round of funding in the spring. And we did come up with, this is the current program, and just kind of how it works in terms of eligibility. The second item there, the historic rehabilitation, that is for things such as, like, there are a few buildings that have original prism lead glass transom windows, something like that would be eligible as a historic feature. And then under the what we're discussing here tonight, and in the spring, you'd also have rear facades and structural building maintenance. And we can take any questions.
I just want to clarify the action tonight. So if you accept our recommendation or modify it, what we will have to come back with is actual program documents. So there are other terms, there's some scoring criteria, some other things that once we understand exactly where and how you want this to be done, then we can update those and bring those back to be adopted, and then we'll be able to roll out the program for users.
Questions, comments?
So I have a few questions. As long as you've got this slide up here, I guess I'll start with this. I don't remember us talking about these grants only being available in the second round. In fact, I was thinking, well, put them in the first round, and if there are other traditional facade grants or historic rehabilitation grants, those take priority over the maintenance. And then they could submit again in the spring if they didn't get it in the fall. But I don't remember a discussion about only spring. So
the motion was to prioritize the other types of grants over that. So in the structure of the current program, that is how that's defined. The spring round is viewed as very secondary to the first round because there may not be money available in the spring. We just followed the current structure, even though there was no direction one way or the other from council. So it would depend on how you want to look at that.
That makes sense. My one concern for that is that if a building does have structural maintenance issues, I would like them to be able to apply for the grant as soon as they can. Just because deferred maintenance doesn't end well usually. So, so that would just be my thought on that. The other thing that I had questions about.
Excuse me, can I just jump in on that point, Claire? When is the traditional award and notification in the fall and the spring?
We would have notified now already for fall, but we were waiting until this discussion was concluded. And then in the spring, April or so, we send out the notices.
I'm just thinking in terms of if someone really needed to get something done, the timing would be critical in terms of if it was spring, notice wasn't until June for sake of discussion. And they had to get bids and find contractors. Maybe they have to wait a full year to get it done. But it sounds like it's a little earlier in the year. It's in April, you said, right? When they
We strive to make it available in April. Often then gets drug out by the applicant in terms of how quickly they respond. And you've made awards in June, but there also wasn't any urgency to it. If you're doing a normal facade grant, it's kind of on your schedule to get your architect and your design lined up. So I think we might have to be a little more formal with this many types of things to be on a timeline. So if someone has submitted, we are saying, yep, we'll get you to council by May 1st or whatever that's going to be. And if you're not ready, you're just not ready. We do a lot of hand-holding to get people ready.
I was thinking to support Corey's point was that if you had it in both rounds, maybe in fall, if they got notified, they would take bids over the winter time for a spring project. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
You do have to submit an estimate with your projects. You can't just approach staff and say, I'm thinking about doing work. Yeah. Am I eligible? You have to have spoken to a contractor or designer, somebody to get you an estimate and drawings up till now. Of course, maintenance in the past wasn't available. So you probably would need some version of a contractor's bid to talk about the tuck pointing or whatever else you're doing.
Thank you.
The other thing that I'm wondering about is on it's page 309 of the packet. But what page is that of this form? The third page, with a list of the activities that would not be eligible for funding. I wanted to have an interpretation of the bullet redesigned facades.
Yeah, and what we were talking about there is if you completely wanted to change something about your facade, so you wanted to, I don't know, enlarge the doorways or move the doorway or move windows or something like that, just completely redesigning it. That's what we were trying to get at. That could also be tied in with, structural aspects or something.
I just didn't know whether it was that interpretation or whether you were talking about something like the Mormon facade, which does not have a historic surface. It has been redesigned over the years. So, but that's not what this is talking about.
Yeah, we were talking about funding of a new design. Yeah, and we did talk about what language to use there. So we could refine that a little bit.
Maybe just newly redesigned facades. I don't know.
I think we're trying to clarify you would have to go into the rear facade grant side of this program and not try to come in under maintenance because you wanted to take off your brick and put white brick. That's not maintenance. That's something else and probably isn't even eligible because you're replacing in kind is already a proposed. So somehow we have to distinguish that and try that and have that in the program now. But the more things we add, the clearer we have to be about what really is not eligible.
Well, and maybe in this case, if you put in a list of what's not eligible, maybe on this one you just say apply for facade grant or eligible under facade grants. I don't know. Anyway, the other question I had was regarding external stairways and whether that includes fire escapes. And the reason I'm thinking about this is because we've been trying to encourage second story housing. And so maintaining exterior staircases, especially fire escapes, is something that potentially enables that to occur. But are fire escapes external stairways?
That was what I had in mind when I said that. Yeah, external stairways, metal that are attached to the facade, something like fire escape, or there are stoops or other kind of concrete stairways that often lead down from a ground level floor. And our thinking was the big things, the walls, the foundation, the roof were the big structural elements. So we focused on the structural aspects there, whereas an external stairway for a fire escape, obviously critical to life and safety, but it's not structural necessarily. So that's why it was not included.
I'm thinking of some fire escapes that I've seen that have been damaging facades, because they're pulling away from the facade as they age. And so I kind of see that as linked to the maintenance issue.
And I would think that if it's something like that, where that would be, that's a structural issue then. And so then, work would be tied to it. I think we probably have to work out the specific detail in something like that. If an element is pulling away from a facade, but to me, that's tied in with it. So the wall is what would be eligible for the work. And so repairing that would make some of that work eligible.
Right. I think the easy example there would be that would be why we want the structural engineer to make sure that we're getting things done and not just cosmetic. I don't think like replacing stairs on the fire escape would be it, but how it's attached to the wall absolutely would be related to structural maintenance. I think that's how I would try to articulate that eventually.
Yeah.
And one last question. Given the challenge of knowing what the rear or alley sides look like, because we don't have a lot of good photos of that, I'm having difficulty wrapping my mind around how we can say that the rear improvements would have to follow eligibility requirements of a regular front facade improvement grant, which relies on the photographic evidence. So it seems like a catch-22.
Agree. Yes. Applying the facade grant as it is currently constructed, the program to the rear. I mean, windows. I could see if you've got a building where the windows have been boarded up, and that is something that currently on the program, we pay for. We just did one earlier this year. In fact, the work is finishing up where windows have been filled in, being replaced with actual functioning sash windows. So I could see that being eligible, and then maybe removing any additional materials that have been added onto the back of a facade. That was a thing mid-century, right, to kind of add on to historic buildings and to modernize them in that way. I think we'd struggle to come up with other work that was eligible without writing entirely new guidelines for the non-front facades.
Mm-hmm. And if we're seeing this as an interim step that will enable perhaps some movement on deferred maintenance, then we can always come back when we have a better sense of how to refine the eligibility requirements or the design guidelines.
Other questions? How do we treat, like along Kellogg, where you have the buildings that face Kellogg, but it's the side of the building? Is that also considered a facade or front facade, or how would you characterize that before?
They're a front, but they don't face Main Street, so they're spring eligible.
Already currently.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you go back to the other slide here, yeah. So the traditional front, the way it's defined right now, has to be on a Main Street kind of front. So a corner building is typically a spring grant if they're trying to do like a Kellogg site. Or it might even be a second grant, so that makes them eligible to spring.
So if the goal of the council is to try and help do improvements, maintain there's multiple sides. You got the rear, and they also have an exposed to the Kellogg or Main Street or Burnett or whatever. That's already covered in terms of the side. It's just not correct.
Yeah, I think if you go back to your proposed slide, if you're gonna move things from spring to fall, I think what we're thinking about here is when this program was first written, and the last major update was roughly 2011. We did some tweaks 2 years ago about increasing the funding and adding 300. The priority of that council, because a similar question had been brought to them, that council prioritized investment on Main Street as the number one priority. So that's where all this structure about the spring round comes from. So if we're starting to think general building investment is more important because of the 40 plus grants that have gone to Main Street, we do not have to have this fall spring structure. That was a decision to emphasize Main Street priorities. So I guess if that's council's direction, we can look at how to sort this out. And then you probably get into like competitive scoring rather than trying to push people to a fall or a spring round. It's a different approach. If you like this, we can do this for 1 year, see how it goes. At this point, we're in September, so the fall round is going to be right on top of the spring round.
And how would the applicant, has Mormon weighed in? Does this kind of accomplish, or would this help them achieve what they wanted to achieve or is this going to other things they're planning on looking at doing that would be exempt under your not eligible for funding?
Yeah, I did talk to Scott earlier today, and he couldn't be here tonight. And he did say that, yeah, what we were proposing, we did discuss with him his intention for his building, which included things such as painting and repair of stucco, replacing of windows. And I explained to him that we focused on structural things, and he would still like to see some of the other aspects, including paint. He mentioned specifically be eligible, but the structural repairs, as we've mentioned, the walls, the foundation, and the roof, the walls and the foundation in particular apply to his project.
On the excluded or non-eligible, replacement of windows and doors and painting are excluded. So then he would not be eligible to apply for funding for that aspect. Is that correct?
Correct. I would add though that I think that the grant will more than be eaten up when it comes to the structural repairs of the walls and the foundation.
So for replace window, just to be clear, if you have a filled-in window, that's removing a non-compliant element. That's not just replacing a window. So if you're removing the non-compliant filled-in window, whatever state it's in, you're still eligible for that rear facade grant. It's if you just have like the glass on the bottom, on the first level there, that's a compliant window for the facade program. Just switching out that glass would be eligible. But those back windows on the recessed facade, you want to open those up or repair those windows, those are eligible as rear facade grants.
And how would you define rear? Would rear also include the west face of the farthest protruding or not?
For maintenance, yes. For the facade grant itself, I don't think we quite worked out that detail yet.
Yeah, so maintenance can be for any part of the building. We took the perspective that council is most interested in the integrity of the building. Therefore, we can't pick a facade to guide that. So all 4 facades will always be eligible for structural maintenance based on this.
So rear would be to anything on the back side of the building.
To me, rear is still parallel to the right of way. That would be our normal definition of a rear facade. But if this is what makes it complicated, the rears of the buildings are all different. There's not uniformity.
Yeah. There are a handful of buildings that are run next to an alley. For instance, the Antorium is got an alley side that is not the technical rear.
Mm-hmm. All right, open to public comments. Anyone that wants to address council on this topic?
Good evening. My name is Ellen Grimm. I'm co-owner of Dog Yard Books, and I'm vice chair of the Ames Main Street Board. And I'm here to speak to you on behalf of our organization. So on behalf of the Ames Main Street Program, our board of directors, and all the businesses in our historic downtown district. I would like to thank you for your consideration of expanding the city's downtown facade grant program. It's important that our city leadership re-examine programs such as these to consider if any improvements can be made to help businesses and building owners improve these historic buildings, which make up the heart of our community. After reviewing city staff's report regarding the expansion of the program, Ames Main Street would like to make the following suggestions. First, consider including the replacement of doors and windows as part of the proposed maintenance eligibility of the program. Normally, being a part of a building's front or rear facade, these features age just as the brickwork does, which is included in city staff's recommendations as an eligible funding item, and both need replacing from time to time. Two, consider including painting, not murals, to rear facades only, as an included item for the proposed maintenance eligibility of the program. As we want to preserve the historic nature of front or side-facing facades, rear facades can be viewed with a more relaxed regard. And three, we agree with city staff's recommendation to include roof repair and replacement in their proposal. As an essential component of any building, roofing is expensive to repair or replace, and including this as an eligible maintenance item would go a long way to assist building owners with their improvement efforts and investments. Thank you for your time and consideration of our suggestions and for your continued support of Downtown Ames.
Chuck Black Hunziker Companies, 105 South 16th Street. Just a little follow-up on Lloyd's comment about fire escapes. So I think last year I had most, if not all of you, come up in a building that I had redone at 214 Main Street. I've gone through and redone the front facade of the building, applied for a facade grant, did qualify, get together on the right color of glass for the transoms and a few other little minor things like that. The roof was almost falling in, so we did that, had to rebolster the roof. So went through that, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the property, more than I spent for the property trying to maintain it. And now I can't get a letter of compliance because I can't get a structural engineer to say that the fire escape on the back of the building is sound. And it's just beyond frustrating. It makes people not want to. Mayor, maybe you can speak to a little bit about having someone come look at something where they can't see inside of the building that's over 100 years old. And they're not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just proved to me that, you know, your fire escape is sound before we'll give you a compliance. To Ellen's point, you know, the building across the street, we went through and we got a facade grant, but you know, last year spent $75,000 putting a new roof on that building, and it was time, you know, before it started to leak inside and other problems. So, you know, I'm glad that you're looking at doing some of the things for downtown. I'm obviously been a supporter and believe in downtown and maintaining the buildings that we have. But every time that we talk, I try to talk about housing and stuff, and why it isn't. You know, things keep popping up that make it very disheartening as a building owner to go through all the things we go through, and then I still don't have a letter of compliance building because I can't get somebody to prove that something's not. And so I agree with a lot of what Ellen said on some of the things. Again, the building there, we put all new windows in. They were, you know, close to 100 years old. And so if you look at some of the other buildings downtown, my fear is that some of the neighboring properties and stuff will just continue to deteriorate. And then as water gets in, we've seen what happened to some of the other properties. So I would encourage you to give serious thought to some of these things that will continue for us to maintain a strong downtown of some of these buildings. The cost to renovate some of these buildings that are, you know, approaching 150 years old now is significant. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'll close public comment.
So I have a question, Kelly. So we're calling this a downtown facade grant. At some point, given the shifting of the focus, do you think it'd be appropriate to rename what this grant is to better describe the scope of the grant?
I mean, I think it's still external walls of a building. So to me, the facade elements are still what it's about. We can name it whatever we like, but it is still exterior oriented.
Yeah, but we're really adding more of a maintenance, and then you heard proposal tonight to add, roof work. It's starting to feel like it's more of a facade and maintenance type grant program. So just two comments I would have. I agree that the scope of the facade grant should change. We've seen a declining number of applications for this over time, and I think the amount of money is too small to really make a difference and attract good projects. And so I would actually be interested in seeing further increases in the funding if we really want to see meaningful improvements. But one of the things that I want council to keep in mind is that we also represent people, have businesses around the community who see their tax dollars going to support these Main Street businesses, and they're competing businesses. So their tax dollars are going to support maintaining their competitors' businesses. So I just want to keep that in mind, that they value the Main Street cultural area, but there are others, though, who have concerns about just how much we're tipping the scales to assist. And when someone buys a building, we would hope that you do due diligence, and we hope that they take into account the roof. Now, over time, the roof needs to be replaced. I also want to make sure that we're not in a situation where we're serving as a backstop when a business does proper due diligence on the structural integrity of their building.
All right, I'm interested in getting a motion from somebody. Some direction to staff.
I'm interested in learning more about what Kelly was talking about with regard to shifting the grants so that we don't have a fall cycle and a spring cycle. But I don't know that I understand the difficulty there would be associated with developing some sort of scoring system.
That's a good question. I am the last slide. So the current system is really designed to the last one on this. All right. Anyway, so when this was done, it was like, oh, we're going to get 6 grants in one period of time, and then how do we pick the best 3 out of 6, right? So it's more about visual impact, quality of the elements, total investment. Same general ideas you expect, probably. I don't know how to weigh maintenance yet in that kind of system, because this was mostly about aesthetics. I don't think it's that big a deal to say for a year we're just going to be open. There's going to be some, because we have to come back with you anyways to adjust this. It's not a permanent system. We can do it for a year if that's what council wants, is to make it eligible for everybody to apply in one particular round. Let people know it's competitive. Like, you may not get a grant, you might not do it, and we can do that and have this available so people understand what it is. If that's what we want to try this year, if you want to wait a year to see what happens and then readjust it, we can do it either way. I think the key was when you gave us this direction, you did not invest staff time in redeveloping the whole program, going out for outreach, hiring, I'm not saying we need to, but hire a consultant to give architectural guidance. None of that was given to us. So if we're still working within the boundaries of what we have, we can turn that around fairly quickly. As a 1-year trial, I think we can do almost anything.
Well, I also don't know whether just leaving it the way you've recommended it for 1 year is problematic. We're already at the point where we might as well.
Yeah, I think we said one thing in August was there is this downtown plan that's been started. I have no idea if building recommendations, improvement conditions for buildings are going to be part of that plan. I don't know that we know yet what exactly that plan is going to address and look at prioritizing. So again, I keep seeing this as 2 rounds, 1 year. Maybe the downtown plan informs it, maybe experience informs a different decision. I just hesitate every year to come back to this program. We spend a lot of time talking about it. It's very valuable to those that use it, so that's important. But every year in the last 3 years, we have talked about this program.
Right. So let's
Okay.
the last paragraph of the staff comments is, if council supports language provided or has modified language, direct staff to prepare updated facade program documents for council approval at future meeting.
That would be my motion. I move we accept this model that's been provided by staff, and we give them direction to create the language for the program.
Or second? All right. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And is there any interest in including, adding doors and windows, painting, and roof repair? Because that currently is not included as presented.
Roof repair is included.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies.
Replacement of existing windows and doors, glass that's already compliant is what is not included.
Or painting.
Or painting.
I would just as soon wait on
Very
those
good.
till we get the Main Street
Very good.
report.
All right. We'll move on. We'll go to item. Thank you, Benjamin. Item 31, request for partial waiver of paving on Yancey development.
On this item, you first reviewed this essentially a year ago. It's a request by the developer to consider 700 feet of Cedar Lane paving that is adjacent, kind of in between 2 points of access to their project. And they're looking for relief to remove that 700 feet of paving obligation from the developer. They've included some rationale for that about overall development costs and the uniqueness of the fact that there are these 3 properties that are within the, or I don't know how to describe it, kind of engulfed by the development that creates this 700 feet of frontage. If this is another developable property, maybe we would have looked at this a little bit differently through the subdivision process. In this case, 2 of the 3 lots have a home. There is 1 vacant lot. It doesn't appear there's a lot of other subdivision value here, so it appears that it kind of is the condition that it is. And in the subdivision code, we require paved access to new development, and that's been a 2-lane road minimum expectation. If you're fortunate enough to be on a county road, then you don't necessarily have to do any improvements except for turn lanes or whatever else you need to do. So we looked at precedent. There's not a lot of precedent about gravel roads having to be improved by developers. It has happened on occasion, but we've also had city projects like paving of Grant Avenue, now Hyde Avenue, as assessment projects to try to account for a larger number of properties that are there. So like for the Grant Avenue project, there's a number of rural homes on that. The costs of the whole road were assumed between the city and the 3 developers to cover those county properties. So the city did participate. We had frontage in that project. But otherwise, there's not a lot of great examples of a little bit of these gaps. And so when you heard this item last year, the direction was look at it as you evaluate pioneer infrastructure or oversizing policies. We've started to do that, but we have not reached a financing strategy to go along with what we think those projects are going to be. And we did conclude as staff that we didn't really see Cedar Lane as fitting into that pioneer conversation. Our working understanding of pioneer is it closes a gap or creates essentially a backbone infrastructure that supports a large amount of growth in and around that. So if this was a mile of undeveloped land and we were paving a mile of gravel road, we would say we opened up 2 square miles of development. That would be an example of a pioneer infrastructure or a water or sewer line. That is an example of this. So I think we're back tonight saying the developer is interested in a decision. They've been waiting a year to get direction on this. We don't think it really fits directly into the pioneer conversation. And we've given you 3 options to look at. All of them, well, if you choose to provide some or all of the relief requested, there would be a follow-up action to do that. If you take no action, the developer would move ahead with their subdivision approval as is. They're not at that phase of construction yet, but the developer does believe it's an impediment to moving ahead, even though they are building that part of the project at this point in time. So if you have any questions about the options, anything else in the history or the precedent, I'm happy to answer those.
Questions?
just to clarify, Kelly, so super sensitive that we act consistently the way we've done in the past, or how future projects could look back on this as evidence of our posture on these things. So could you help the council? Is this really a sort of a one-off unique situation that really is not likely to be repeated, or do we need to be sensitive that there could be other projects that this would be a precedent for? Can you speak to that?
I think there has not been much precedent previously. I do think it will come up again when we go into our new growth phase. So, like, for example, the south growth area on the east side of Highway 69, south of Southdale, that area there, both 265th Street and I remember the north-south street, they're both gravel roads that have rural farm places on them, rural homes. Those roads will have to be improved. We can't have urban development and then have gravel road. And so whether that's a city project that gets assessed out like Grant Avenue, I don't know that yet. That's that pioneer conversation. So it's going to come up. I don't know if it's going to come up in this small of a case where you have one project that has 3 houses that are impacted. There's 3 houses in a row. That's kind of unique, right? Usually you have the farm place and you're going to go another 1,000 feet or something until there's another farm place. Sometimes they split 2 houses off. The 3 in a row is probably a little bit different.
And then Steve's project has been going on for a little while. Is this an issue? I couldn't understand this from the packet, that was something that has arisen as it's gone along, or is it something that could have been anticipated from the beginning? In other words, was this situation sort of baked in from the beginning and it just is now coming up as an issue? I'm not sure I understood.
I'll let Steve can probably respond that a little bit. I would say it was known as part of the subdivision approval. I don't know the developer, having not moved into the first phase of development, had a full understanding of cost of development. That's how I understand why we're here today. It's not that he didn't understand that we had asked for the subdivision improvement for paving a street. It's how the project moved forward that has brought him back to discuss this piece.
Okay, thanks.
Other question?
Kelly, what is the Iowa State land being used for right now?
I think they farm it.
I think it's also a odor buffer between the development just to the north and also the livestock confinement or livestock area to the south.
I'm trying to anticipate what happens in the future when we aren't the city council. Now, we waive the maybe that's not the right word. We said we aren't going to be developing further south, and therefore this isn't pioneer infrastructure because we're not opening up that land. But our decisions as a council cannot bind future councils. And so at some point that may well become land that's going to be developed. We now know how much it costs or how much the costs continue to go up to pave roads. And part of me says it's a 700-foot segment that could in the future be a link to something that's development. So maybe it is sort of pioneer infrastructure because we can't know for certain what's going to happen if the city continues to grow and another council makes different decisions. I don't know. 700 feet just seems such a short distance, and yet I can see that cost ballooning in the future.
Any other questions?
Can you remind us about state's responsibility on that 700-foot section
question as well.
Right. It's another unique aspect. If we, again, were somewhere else, we would say developer has to build 2 lanes of a road to get there at 100% their costs. In this case, ISU assumed a prior developer's obligation to pay for half of the street. So of the 700 feet, 50% is assigned to ISU, 50% to Ansley. And that's what they're asking to have their that 700 feet removed. ISU will still pay for their 50%.
And I don't see an option explicitly laid out for the city paying less than 100%. So like, having ISU pay half and then the city pay half of what's left, for example. Is that something that?
I would say that's an alternate option too. If there's a full or partial. So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. I mean, they're essentially asking for either the obligation to be removed or for the cost to be removed. Like you could look at it 2 different ways. So alternative 2 would be an approach to a development agreement, basically that somehow does cost sharing one way or another.
Yeah.
Option 1 is the full removal of the requirement. Nobody's responsible for it. Ansley's not, nor is the city. Some future council may choose to do it, but they're not obligated to do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, like Gloria said, we just don't know the future. And if we don't do it now, I just worry about having a chunk of gravel in something that might be a connection in the future. And so it's kind of on that too, but I'll wait. Other people there talking.
All right, well, public comment. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic?
Hello, my name is Steve Bergeson, and thank you for taking this up tonight. There's just a number of different facets to this. I'd like to just share our perspective, and Tim, your question about why now and how did this come up, and the historical precedent of this was probably around 30 years ago. We were in a meeting with Iowa State and Friedrich. They had come to a point where they wanted to sell the land back because of, economic reasons or whatever. Iowa State was willing to buy the land back. And it came up at that time that Friedrich had a developer agreement to pay for all the utilities along Cedar Lane, but also they would be responsible for stormwater management off of that land. In that meeting, my father actually stood up for future development, not even knowing it was going to be us. But we came to an agreement with Iowa State that they would assume and get put into that mix was the exorbitant amount of money to pay for the stormwater management that was part of the previous developer's responsibility. But when it got sold back to Iowa State, it's just no one's responsibility. And so there are 4 reasons why we're here, and it really has to do with 700 linear feet that is abutting private property. We're not asking for any of the Ansley development. We're thinking that's our responsibility, but this 700 linear feet has and there was an allowance made in Kelly's argument about extreme hardship. I'd just like to explain from our perspective what that is and how we are assessing this. So the first part has to do with the stormwater. Okay, when we started down this pathway of Ansley, we had no idea the cost for managing that stormwater of that land that now is owned by Iowa State, but at one time was owned by a developer who had the responsibility to mitigate the stormwater. 70% of our stormwater costs is attributed to managing the water that is put upon us by the surrounding Iowa State land. That number is $400,000. And The other part to it that happened 30 years ago, and I don't, Kelly can check this out, but we also had a sewer expense that was exorbitant because the sewer line was never brought to the end point of the pavement for Cedar Lane. For some reason, it was allowed to be north of Cottonwood. Now, what does that have to do with extreme hardship? Well, we couldn't tap into that sewer line because it would mean tearing up the roads. The cost was going to be exorbitant. That sewer line, and I'm quoting our engineer, Greg Bouchard from Golden Bank, should have been put at the end of Cedar Lane where it was the pavement stopped. But since it wasn't, we had to bring the sewer line all the way over from the Aurora apartments to be able to hook up sewer for our phase one Ansley development, which in our view should have been able to be a relatively easy tap. But that was all part of that exchange with Iowa State. And so that was a cost of $200,000 to be able to bring that sewer line from Aurora to be able to plug the sewer lines in for phase one. All that expense has to be leveraged out to all the lots in Ansley. So it's not that we're, why can't this wait for when we get into phase 4 and 5? Is we have to put these expenses onto every lot that comes into Ansley. The other two expenses that we incurred, which is in a little bit different category, but they were expensive. And the Xenia buyout $150,000. Just buy out the water rights that Xenia had. And the fourth one was to buy out the wetlands at a cost of $100,000. Now, what does that have to do with the original point of stormwater? Because of all the water coming upon Ansley, not only did we have to put 60-inch storm tile in that ran all the way from Cedar Lane to the new pond that we needed to build, but we needed to build that pond because we needed more holding retention space. But not only that, we needed to build another pond on the Roth land. Thankfully, they agreed to let us do that to accommodate, again, 70% of the water that was coming upon us from the surrounding Iowa State land. And the buyout for the wetlands, we were disturbing wetlands that were surrounding the old pond, but we had to dig the bigger pond, which disturbed the wetlands, so we had to put the money into the wetlands bank. And so I'm coming to the council not complaining at all. It's been an amazing ride. But I want you to understand the reality of when we're coming to you with a 700 linear foot strip that has a cost of $200,000. The reason for that is because of the exorbitant cost to get to where we're at today. And if there was ever an opportunity for us to appeal to the council that this 700 feet is abutting private property and we can't leverage those expenses onto any development costs. And so now, exciting news in all this is we're committed. Ansley we've got our third house started. Economic times are a challenge, but we've been in conversation with Iowa State 4 different meetings because we think we're at a point now where they're going to come to an agreement with Ansley and with the Roth farm, the surrounding farmland, to deal with cleaning up the water coming off of the farmland. And this is important to them. And as one of the people at Iowa State said, I would much rather deal with you than 170 homeowners that are complaining about water coming off of the farm. So we're excited about that. We are planting trees, forbs. We are improving the environment. We have 2 living, breathing ecosystem ponds that are 35 feet deep. We just need help with that $200,000 amount for the 700. And that's why we're here tonight. So I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input. There are no further questions or discussion. That entertain a motion on one of the options or an alternative option.
I'll take a stab at I'll move option 2 for the city to pay that 200,000.
So option 2 as presented.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion.
And so I'm supportive of this too. But back to my issue of precedent, how can we just agree that this is sort of a unique set of circumstances?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, my reasoning for that is that it's limited. It is it's a very, I mean, $200,000 is $200,000, but that's small in the street construction scale of things. And I do think that we shouldn't discount that at some point in the future, some of that farmland might not be farmland. Like, you know, Iowa State's budget gets tighter every year too, right? And they're going to look for, I just don't know the future there, right? So to me, it can be justified just enough as a potential for pioneer infrastructure that I think that case could be made here. And that it's, I mean, again, it's a small chunk. And so that's unique too. That's kind of my thought process on that.
Well, and I would be concerned about looking at the question of extreme financial hardship because we haven't had good luck in the past determining how you prove that hardship. And so I don't see that as a firm footing here. I think that whatever sympathy we have for the situation still opens up a precedent. And so I think that the argument that this could conceivably be pioneer infrastructure is, to me, the sounder argument. And it's only because of our agreement as a council that we are not going south, that it's not really pioneer infrastructure, right? So it's not resting on anything that can't be overturned by the future council. Our decision is not.
For me, I'm very sympathetic. Xenia buyout thing, we've talked about this at length. I'm so frustrated with the way in which property owners, developers have been held hostage. And I use that word intentionally by it's almost extortion. And I also want to point out the work that Steve has done in terms of stormwater management, I think is really commendable and really a model for other developments. And there is a benefit to the community that is in excess of just his property. So I think those are all the factors and totality of circumstances that warrant support for this.
All right.
We need to then say something about the pioneer infrastructure piece, part of the motion only, so it's in the record somewhere, or?
We have to draft a development. Option 2 leads to a
Okay.
development agreement.
All
So it's a loose structure to remove most or all, essentially all of the obligation from Ansley. So whatever whereases we want to put at the beginning of the development agreement, that would be appropriate there. I understand from council comments, we can construct it that way.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Very good. Any other questions for council on this item?
Just to be clear, since it's not impending right now, that we'll work on the development agreement. It's not going to happen in the next few weeks. There's some other things going on. So we'll work with Mr. Bergerson to get that done on a reasonable timeframe.
Very good. Thank you. Move on to item number 32, request for acceptance of first speculative building on North Dayton TIF district with no penalty. Kelly's here. I don't know. I think council is a good report. Is there any questions for Kelly on this particular request?
I have a question. It seems like there was, I don't know if it was a misunderstanding, lack of clarity, whatever happened, but were we in communication with the developer about what was happening before we just sent a letter saying you owe us $15,000?
Well, in the sense that we notified them in May that they weren't done. They asked for an extension. We had an extension. When the time came, they had contacted us and said, I think we're done. And we responded from there. So it was.
I guess I'm just trying to, it seems like some of this could have been worked out among staff and the developer and not here. Because, and I don't know, that's just what I'm getting from the report. Like July 2nd, developer sends a picture asking, is it complete? Staff expresses concerns, and then we send a letter. And I'm just trying to figure out like the behind the scenes logistics and whether, I mean, we have relationships with people who have been doing business here for many, many, many years. Was there really no option to figure things out without it coming back to us?
In my opinion, the agreement defined a complete building. I made the conclusion myself in July it was not a complete building. So for what I had to go on from an agreement, I thought I had to implement the agreement the way it was written. Disagreement on exactly what the expectation is, why it's back here. My conclusion was it was not done at that time. It's complete now. That's why we're supporting the suggestion to not levy the penalty, because it was about a month after the expectation that we had in the agreement.
Okay.
Typically, staff cannot interpret provisions of an agreement that are mandatory. And that's how I looked at that when I was evaluating it in July.
I think you're trying to get to a broader point. Technicality, right? One of us trying to reach out and communicate.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a better picture of like what's happening behind the scenes. I think in general, I'm speaking for myself, like, I don't want to see things like this coming to council for us to discuss, or at the very least, like they get thrown on the consent agenda saying we're going to extend the deadline. I don't know exactly where the various communications took place and what happened over that period of weeks, but from the staff report, it seems like there was an inquiry, a staff answer, and then we sent a letter saying, and it didn't seem like there was actually collaboration on the part of both parties to say, how can we figure out how to get this done? And if we need to just submit something to council for an extension, we'll do it, et cetera, et cetera.
So that is how it worked the first two times there was an extension. I think it was just the immediacy of having an extension and seeing how the agreement was that it led to this action. There had been other discussions, but that's just how it played out in July.
Okay.
Other questions?
So Kelly, if we approve this now, will future development agreements that specify complete buildings have different details in them or more details in them?
Unfortunately, we added this in this agreement because the last one was not what the terms in the last agreement from South Bell is not what we were accepting by the developer. So we added this terminology to try to move towards what the expectation was. And it's for some reason that was even more debatable apparently than it was the first time. So absolutely, we will add exactly what is in the direction to staff is what we expect. It's completed siding, roof, and filled in openings. If we ever have another speculative building, it'll be very clear.
When it's defined as a shell.
Yep. So I don't think there'll be this problem ever again. It'll be black and white what the expectation is.
More questions? Right.
Move alternative one.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Good. I'll move on. Thank you, Kelly.
Yep.
Anything else from council on that, or are you good to go?
I'm good to go. I just assumed my next item.
Oh, okay. Move on. Item number 33, hearing on 2024-2025 shared use path maintenance contract number 2. I declare a public hearing on this item to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any questions for staff on this item? Otherwise, I entertain a motion accepting reported bids.
I love the fact that we came in under the estimate this time, and I would move that we accept the report of bids.
Second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Entertain a motion resolution approving final plan specifications and awarding a contract to TK Concrete in Capella, Iowa, in the amount of $106,664.90.
Approval.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
And on number 34, declare a public hearing on the 2024-2025 Water System Improvement Program, North Russell Avenue, Lincoln Way to North 2nd Street. To be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this particular project? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on accepting reported bid.
Move we accept the report of bids.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Entertain a motion on resolution approving final plan specifications and awarding the contract to Iowa Water and Waste System LLC of Ames, Iowa, amount of $104,910.50.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Item number 35. Is there any questions for Keith? Comments on the report? Okay. Here, public hearing on the Ames City Auditorium HVAC replacement project to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this project? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion accepting reported bids and delay the award to provide staff additional time for review.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Item 36, hearing on zoning text amendment to planned use development overlay standards. Kelly.
Just quickly, we're adjusting 3 unrelated aspects of the PUD overlay. We're addressing some standards to help use it for infill that was not previously available. So that's sites under 2 acres. You're also creating the pocket neighborhood development option. And then the third thing was in response to the ADC short-term housing task force letter asking for some relief to the garage relationship to the front door. And we're proposing to allow for up to a 12-foot recessed front door behind the face of the garage. Currently, you would have to have at least equal to or have a porch element that comes out of the garage to meet that standard. This would allow for a fully recessed door of up to 12 feet. Any questions?
Questions? Did you solicit input from anybody, developers or home builders or anything?
Yeah, we had back in February when we were working through the APC letter a little bit more, and you were considering the 20% flexibility rule for zoning. We updated our developer outreach list. So I used that same list to explain the PUD was going to the commission. I had 2 people provide feedback. One said, looks good. Another one, Justin Dodge, participated at the P&Z hearing and commented on it and supported the changes as well. So 2 people did respond.
And I just have one clarification on your 6A. where it says the standard is met when a garage does not protrude forward from the front facade of the front entry is set back. Is there a word that happened to be missing there?
Yeah, and I contacted legal today. The word of should be replaced with the word or. There's really two ways to meet the standard. There's the old way, or you could be a front entry that is typically 12 feet or less from the garage. So I think if we switch of to or, we've clarified what that is.
So the first red word is facade, then that should be facade or the.
Correct. Yep. It's a little different than we talked this afternoon after I read it again.
It would be on
No, the word
under 29.1114, number 6 in parentheses, and then paragraph A in parentheses. And it's the third line where it says facade of should read, if the council moves it, facade or.
Right.
Okay. All right, I'll declare a public hearing on this zoning text amendment to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, declare public hearing to be closed. Is there a motion on first reading of ordinance with the minor change of that one word, changing of to or?
Move on first as amended.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Very good. Thank you very much. Then item 37, entertain a motion on second reading of ordinance relating to zoning text amendment to amend the exception standards for downtown service center DSC zoning district.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Very good. All right, move on to disposition of communications to council. We have 6 items. Number 1, letter from Dan Culhane, Chris Nelson, Ames Regional Economic Alliance, request for infrastructure extension at Tower Avenue interchange, and in conversation with the city manager, this is recommendation that be referred to him for a correct.
there's two issues here. One is a bigger issue about extending it. The initial one is getting a cost of the sewer line. So I think we're going to deal with the last issue first. That's what we want to talk about, the cost, see if we can get your cost on that. We may be already working on that. So there won't be additional costs. Doing it.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Number 2, cyclone welcome weekend memo from Chief Huff, just for information. Item number 3, email from Jennifer Harris regarding 913 Carroll Avenue concerns. And
Did we get another from a different person about the same property?
I think so.
Mhm.
What did we do about that one? Do you remember?
We responded to it.
Yeah, we sent people out there. I'm not sure there are any.
I think that actually it was from this person. He actually
Yeah.
acknowledged that inspection didn't come out and take care of a few items. In conversation with Steve, he suggested a motion just directing him or asking him to go out and visit with her personally and try and investigate the information on the situation.
We just might not have the ammunition we need in the property maintenance code to deal with the issues there. I'll have to report back if that's the case or not.
So the motion would be to direct Steve to reach out to her.
I'll go out there personally.
I would move that.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Next is an email regarding waste management costs from Bob Hogg. Excuse me.
I would move that we thank him for
We're working on that. So not as quickly as he'd like.
Would you want staff to
Yes.
respond just with an explanation where we're at?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Item 5, think it's just in response to the question that was raised at last council meeting regarding liquor license for premises in residential areas. There's any follow-up desired on this one? Hearing none, move on to Kelly Diekman's request for waiver of infrastructure for Dayton Ridge subdivision, and his memo has a couple options presented. I would say this council interested in placing this on a future agenda.
Move replace this item on the future agenda.
Second.
Discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, we'll move on to item for the governing body. Anything from Discover Ames?
No meeting.
Okay.
Be one next week.
Very good. How about Ames Regional Economic Alliance?
No meeting yet.
Okay. Story County Emergency Management will be meeting in October. And how about transit?
We haven't met since the last time.
Okay, very good. Council comments. Emily, how's school going?
Pretty good. Pretty solid start so far. We launched the Message the Mayor program on the student government website on Wednesday. The goal is to have 100 legitimate responses, hopefully by the end of this semester. We're going to be putting posters up. I just have to tap into my creative mind and design them. We have one message already, and it says hello. So that I really won't bring more of that to you in the future. I'm the one kind of designating which ones I'll bring, but we launched that program and we're pretty excited about it.
All right, very good. Emily?
I can't think of anything.
Okay. Anita?
It was great seeing the launch of the townhomes, but I'll let you talk more about that because you had to speak.
Amber?
Nothing for me.
So I'm actually going to say something about the ribbon cutting.
Good. Groundbreaking or ribbon?
I even had a note that it's a groundbreaking, not a ribbon cutting. The groundbreaking for the townhomes at Creekside this afternoon was notable for one particular reason, and that was the praise that the developers gave to our development assistants. And one of them even said that he thought that Ames was the easiest place to do a development like this that he has ever experienced in Iowa, large cities or small, and that our team, made up of many members of our staff from different departments, was exceptionally helpful throughout the process. So kudos to our team for helping to plan the whole project for the townhomes at Creekside in conjunction with the developer. Second, I want to call attention to what Troy said, which was that this has been, with regard to the Fitch Family Aquatic Center, moving of the power line is the easiest power line relocation in his career because electric services was on it and did a great job coming up with options. So I think two praiseworthy staff interactions, and those were long-term processes. And it wasn't just snap your finger and get something done. Worth our notice. So I want to give praise to staff for what they've done.
Yeah, I would echo what Lori just shared, and I talked to the developer afterwards too, and he was effusive in terms of how well things went, and just we stood out. And he hasn't just done one development. He's done a number of them across the state and business. So take great encouragement from that, because sometimes we can hear the counterpoint as well. And also, there are several representatives from the CCOM, College Creek Old Ames Middle School were there, and they were very excited about the project. They were very supportive of it. And I just go back to, man, it's been years that we've been on council, and they came and talked, offered feedback, and it just showed that the process system, they appreciate having been heard. They feel like they've been heard, and that they're excited about the project. And I think the other thing was the developer said they believe this is going to be one of their nicest projects that they have developed also. So it's pretty exciting.
There was also something else, Mayor, that the developer shared with me, and that was that he felt that the city's commitment to following through on this process was remarkable, because so many cities abandon their plans a couple of years in, and we have hung in to make this development. Some of us, our entire council career has been about that piece of land. And he really felt that we had shown commitment to the value of developing affordable housing.
All right, very good.
And one more thing, if you're going to head us out of here, I forgot. Another kudos, I don't know, praise for Parks and Recreation staff. I attended the Verticat demonstration of the accessible golf cart today, which enables those people who are mobility challenged, unable to stand up on their own, to be able to stand up with this cart. And I just think that our move toward including those with different abilities in our recreation programs has been a very welcome change, and that I appreciate that Parks and Rec is continuing to look for those opportunities. And if Ames gets one of these things, we will be the only golf course in the state of Iowa that has one. So kudos to Parks and Rec for continuing to work on accessibility issues in our parks and our facilities.
Right. Take a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn. Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.